There's a huge disconnect between the sales and marketing teams right now in businesses. This needs to shift and change for companies to be able to grow in revenue. Marketing needs to be held accountable for revenue. It cannot just be sitting on sales to be able to do that. Hi, my name's Harps Mangat. I am the founder and fractional CMO at One Raw, and this is Unreasonably Optimistic. All right, so I've got 15 years of marketing experience, and it's really helping B2B, B2C startups and small, medium businesses really drive growth. I absolutely love, my passion lies in startups. It's that mode where you're scrappy, you need to pivot fast, make changes, you need to be high level, strategize, and then roll up your sleeves and get into the weeds of things. So that's what I kind of really enjoy doing. And as I guess as my career grew in that field, for me, it was really, how do I take this to the next level? How do I help more companies at this stage? I kind of got into that fractional world, which I absolutely love. And given my background's been in so many different industries, I've done logistics, healthcare, I've done ed tech, cybersecurity, so many different fields that I feel I am able to support so many different companies, no matter what the industry is. So that brought me into the fractional world, and now I am serving startups and small medium businesses to really scale, go to market with products, and help them, look at new opportunities in the market that they haven't thought about so far.
Can I just go ahead and say God bless you for that? Because startups are typically not the easiest groups to work with for not just a reason, it's a bunch of reasons, right? It's, running 1,000 miles an hour in 100 different directions, no delegation, not enough capital,
Yep.
no sales, no research, no history.
Yep.
And they're trying to, disrupt, they're trying to change the world with their, newest, latest thing.
Yeah, no resources, not enough budget. It's tough, but it's also what makes it so exciting to be in.
Yeah. So you are not originally from California.
I am not. I'm originally from England. That's where I was born and brought up, where all my family is. I really moved to the US about 10 years ago. So I've lived on the East Coast in Florida for 5 years, and then now I'm in California in the Bay Area, and I absolutely love it. It's an amazing place to live and be. So yeah, very grateful.
Yeah, we got that sunshine.
Yes, absolutely. And all the wineries close by, which
There you go.
helps.
That's the important part. But do I remember that you're originally from, is it Birmingham?
Correct, yes.
You know what that is right there?
Oh, right there.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's Old Trafford.
Yeah.
My son and I built that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I love that.
That's
awesome.
So to kind of help me better understand the role of a fractional CMO and how that might be different from, a full-time CMO or even just a marketing director or a full-time agency, like how does that work within the framework of a startup?
Yeah, there's a huge difference between all of those roles. Businesses that are in that growth phase have a few options, really, when they're looking to build up their marketing function. They can, one, hire a full-time exec who is great, highly experienced, but they're not the ones that are going to roll up their sleeves and get into the weeds. That's just not where their skill set lies. They're there for strategy to really help you optimize. But also, there's a huge expense and commitment to make when you hire a full-time exec, and not every business is ready for that. They can also go off to hire a junior marketer, so much more affordable. They're able to get the task done. They're executing on what you've asked them to. But when it comes to thinking about optimization and what is that data showing, how can we strategize to drive higher ROI, you've lost them. That's not where their skill set lies at all. So then the fallback to date has really been find an agency that can help us. But this just isn't working anymore. They're not in the weeds of the company politics or the conversations that are happening, all that essential internal discussions that are taking place day to day. They completely miss. They meet you once a week and you're always updating them on what's going on in the business. They're playing catch up, and that just doesn't work when you're in that growth phase. So for me, there was a real gap of helping these companies with affordable marketing expertise, where they don't have to have that commitment of a full-time employee, but also to be embedded in the business. And that's really what we do at One Raw. We're their kind of part-time in-house marketing team. We take on their company email, where we attend all their weekly meetings, and that can be a product meeting, a leadership meeting, a sales meeting, a revenue meeting, a CX meeting. We are truly kind of integrated into the business and act as their strategic partner. So rather than just being that external agency, so we meet them pretty much 5 to 10 times a week. And most folks in the company don't even realize that we are part-time or work on a fractional basis because of this model that we adopt at One Raw. But also there's another need for fractional, which goes beyond just affordability, and that's flexibility for me. When companies are at this growth stage, they make so many pivots. As you know, they need a lot of different skills, but for just a shorter amount of time to keep up with these initial demands and needs of the company. So they might need a marketing leader who initially wants to need help with brand awareness, a new website, with messaging. 6 months down the line, you now need to focus on content marketing, SEO, thought leadership, blog generation. And then 3 months down the line, we need to pivot again. Now we need marketing to work on lead generation. And to expect that same leader and that team that you originally hired to be able to support in all these areas is actually a big ask. We are specialized in certain aspects of marketing, and there's very few leaders out there that can do all of them. So what happens is that you find those people you originally hired are no longer now fit for the needs of the business, and that you're seeing gaps emerge in the function. So you end up having turnover and having to bring new people on. And this is where fractional marketing really excels, because it really does pivot with the needs of the company. Until you get to a point where your marketing needs stabilize and you understand those ongoing skills that are really needed in the company, until then, you don't really need to hire full time. One Raw has come in so many times with different companies too. It could be that they've got a new product offering, they're going to market, but they don't know who their ICP is. They're expanding into a new market, but they're not sure how. Or they've just let go of their leader, or they've just resigned, and now they need to fill that gap in before they hire again. They're stuck on a certain revenue, and they don't know how to accelerate it. Or it's just too early for them to hire. Like, all of these are perfect situations where fractional marketing just comes in and fills that gap for them until they're ready for a full-time hire.
I love it. That's honestly the best explanation of that I've ever heard, like by far and away. There really is with startups, and you kind of hit on this, is that there's so many pivots in such a short amount of time. And not only is it hard for people to be able to like accept the new role, the chaos of change puts people on tilt just by itself. So then having to go and like figure something out on your feet and go through that's tough for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. It causes a lot of tension, and also a delay, I think, in growth as well. Think about if you've been hired for a certain role and now you're expecting something completely different from them. That's not their skill set at all, and they're under so much immense pressure to perform, and it's just not fair on the people you're hiring either. So it's really kind of what's best for the needs of the company at that time, and where does fractional marketing fit in?
So, I think probably one of the biggest things that you're dealing with is this, it's the relationship and the timing of sales and marketing, and when you need the two of those things, because it's often, it kind of goes like this, like you market and you get opportunity, and then or you go to do sales and you get opportunity, and you're turning these on and off at like different times, and they should work together but aren't always working together. And so how have you dealt with that?
I love this topic. It's something I'm so passionate about. I see this misalignment between these two teams in so many companies, and honestly, it's because they've been set up to fail. That's my opinion. I think as leaders of the company, when you set OKRs and goals and give these two teams different North Stars to obtain, conflict is inevitable. It's I can give you an example of this. So, for example, marketing, go get leads. When you bring in, we need you to bring in 500 leads this quarter, whereas sales team are asked to close X dollars in revenue or X number of demos need to be held. Without realizing it, this has set both teams up to fail because leads don't equal revenue. It's so simple. But yes, you're still holding your marketing team to hit this target. No wonder sales teams get frustrated. Martin have this lead goal and off they go to the races to use up their budget to give them the maximum amount of leads, but they're not thinking about whether these leads are going to convert to demos. They just know they have to hit this number by the end of the quarter and they're not going to miss it. So sales team are rightfully getting frustrated because those leads aren't booking demos. And if they do book the demo, they aren't a good fit. They're pushing back to Martin to say, hey, these leads are no good, but Martin have hit their goal. And they see this as a sales problem to now solve. So what happens is at the end of the quarter, the company does not hit their revenue target. And that's a huge issue. And it becomes a blame game of whose fault it is this quarter of why they didn't hit it. And I think the other struggle is that they don't know where to start. There's a lot of companies that want to move to this model where sales and marketing are working together, but they don't know how to help these two teams to collaborate. And there's a huge disconnect there. How do you get them to speak the same language, work together on one goal? What infrastructure does it need to be set up for that to happen? And by that, I mean, what platforms do we need? What dashboards do we need? What reporting do we need? What meetings need to be set up to make sure we're aligned? There's so many different things that need to be thought through to help this be fixed, because it's not something that's just going to happen overnight. So I think it's a struggle because there's a huge change in culture and the way we think about this, from a team perspective and from a leadership perspective too.
Yeah. So I think that, is one of the things that when you were talking about that, marketing has this goal and they're like, well, we did what we were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And sales is, pushing back. And there's a lot of hubris, I think, in that, where sales is like, just put them in front of me and I'll close anybody. And then, marketing's like, here you go. And they're not, they're not qualified. They don't really kind of go through all that. But I mean, I think there's, and this is my guess, but there's probably a process, but not a one size fits all, thing. So what are the steps? Like, how do you start getting these two teams aligned, and what's your process for going through that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, there's definitely a pivot to start acting and taking this one team approach. And I'm not saying you need one leader to oversee both teams. If anything, you do not want to do that. I've seen some really bad examples where you bring a sales leader in who's overseeing marketing as well, or vice versa, and that doesn't work. But what I mean by one team is to stop acting as sales and marketing and act as a revenue team. This goes a long way. And what you'll find is that they will actually be thinking about what's best for the company and for the growth of the company, rather than worrying about covering their backs or pointing fingers. So I think definitely trying to build that mentality that we are one team with one target. And that goes into, I guess, another step is having a shared goal. And it needs to be a revenue goal. Set them both the same goal if you can. You'll find the whole dynamic between these two teams shifts just by giving them the same revenue goal. So, for example, when a sales team may have been asked, let's say a sales team asked marketing to support on a pitch deck or a one pager that can help convert an opportunity, or there's issues with lead conversion, that would have been annoying and an afterthought for marketing team, and even like seen as a hassle for them, to be honest, of, that's not our goal. That's not what we're measured on. We're going to have to spend some time to create this material for sales. But if we change that goal now to a revenue goal, and if marketing know that this one page can help convert an opportunity to a closed one, they're now going to drop everything to make that happen. And if a pitch deck is not converting demos into opportunities, well, why not? And marketing suddenly will care now and will want to perfect it. If opportunities are stuck in the pipeline, now marketing is going to want to help problem solve with sales as to why that is. That whole dynamic is shifting now because everything's about closing deals and hitting that revenue goal. You could go a step further with revenue goals and even split that up. and say, you know what, we're going to have an inbound goal and an outbound goal. So marketing have their own goal, sales have their own, and together they tie into the total revenue goal. So that can happen too. The biggest friction when doing this is going to be really from the marketing leader, not from sales. For sales, you're going to find that they're actually going to, by working as one team, I think form a better understanding and respect for marketing. Then get a whole new insight into what marketing does and how it can have an impact on sales. But if you think about it from the marketing point of view, they've never been held accountable to a revenue target before. So there needs to be coaching to help them understand why this approach has been adopted, and they need to, and how they're going to be tracking things moving forward. I've been brought into companies where this has been my sole purpose, to train their existing marketing team, their leaders, to move to a revenue driven goal. And I can tell you it's not a natural shift for them. It causes a huge amount of anxiety in marketing teams. And it also means that now they need to trust each other. There's these two teams who have never got on, and now they're being asked to start working together and get rid of that previous tension and friction that they had. And that's really not simple. And I think another one probably around this should probably be something around, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but funnel terminology. I feel this is something that teams they think, oh, this is simple and we don't need to address it and we can just skip over this one, but it can cause huge issues later. Having the right terminology for how we talk about the funnel is a shared understanding between the teams. So when we measure and track progress, you don't want there to be ambiguity. There's so many variations on what is an MQL, what's an SAL, what's an SQL, and that's fine. But within one company, you have to have that agreement on what it is. When does someone become a lead? When does that lead become an MQL? What actions do they need to take for it to become an MQL? What is an SAL in this company? When does that change to an SQL? Is there a demo stage? Is it a demo held stage? I've seen people call SAL, SQL demo held, demo booked and demo held. Others, that's a different stage altogether. And it's fine however it's set up, but we need to have an agreed understanding because that's our shared language when we talk through reporting every month. So we really need to think that through. And also on the other side, like now you need to educate marketing team on what the sales funnel looks like. After demo is booked and held, you have the opportunity stage, but is there also a nurture stage? Is there a working stage? What do they mean? Why have they fallen into these categories? So there needs to be an alignment on all of that at some point pretty early on. Sales team haven't always figured this out. I think sometimes marketing worry that, oh, well, this is a stupid question for me to ask. And, sales team already know this, but they haven't always got it figured out. And it's good for marketing to probe and ask these questions because you only really want to do this exercise once. So my advice really would be to really commit some time to this step, to really understand it 100%, not just as you two teams, but also as the leaders in the company to understand what this terminology means, because otherwise there can be a huge amount of disagreement later on.
I mean, I've come into sales teams after they've been set up, and you could look in a CRM and you see like the 100 different names they have for what somebody is and what stage. And that's you bringing up the having agreement about the funnel and the steps and understanding. I think that's good for both sets of teams to understand, like, well, what's it going to take to get someone from 0 to 100, right? Because
Absolutely.
it's not like, oh, I saw an ad, here's my money. Like it doesn't work that way. And obviously every company is going to have different things. A question I have for you that's kind of around this is, with startups, typically the owner is going to be head of sales or involved in marketing, one of the two, right? And sometimes both of them, but the person who started it, the founder, someone at the top is going to be pretty involved in this. And an interesting thing about that is that no one can sell better than the owner because you're so intimate with it. And you're the guy that can say, I started this company, I believe in this company. And so there's no more trust and authenticity than that person. And so when you're trying to get them to take a step back and let marketing and sales come together and not say, let me tell you how it's done. Like
Yeah.
You want leadership involved, but do you really want to involve? Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think they definitely need to feel like they're heard. I think to use them really early on to find out, how do you pitch? What value have you seen? What words resonate with your prospects? And all that intel is crucial. Like you need to know that. You don't want to start from scratch when they already have so much knowledge on what works and what doesn't work. But then it's building trust for them to see, even listen in on some of those demo calls you hold. Like let them hear it. I actually encourage kind of sales team of share those clips with marketing too. Like we want to hear how those demo calls are going. Is there something we can perfect in our messaging that's going to help close those deals earlier on because those answers are already provided up front for them. So I think it's a hard balance. You need to slowly push them away, gently nudging them out the door, but it takes time, and you do need to build that trust. They need to see that conversions are happening. They need to hear what's your intel, like what new insights you're bringing that they weren't even aware of. That all that kind of starts building trust. You know, I can share an example of kind of there was a when marketing there was a company I was coaching for their marketing team, and they realized when they were asking questions, for example, on the funnel, their sales team for some reason it was quite odd. They were closed lost. They put closed lost on everything that after the demo stage, if they weren't a right fit, it went into closed lost. Martin originally thought, oh, that's just how you do things, and then realized, but hold on, when we listen to those calls they do seem interested. They're just saying that the timing's not necessarily right, or they're still browsing and they're still looking. So why are we close lost in them and not instead adding them to nurture? Because that's where Martin excels. Martin knows how to nurture leads. So they added this whole new section into the funnel of no, we're actually going to bucket them into nurture. They're going to stay in our pipeline and we're going to work these leads for sales to get them to a point where they rebook the demo or when they're ready to find a solution, we're top of mind because these are warm leads. They've already met with sales once. Things like that builds trust with the owner, with the founder, with the CEO, because they're like, oh, you're thinking outside the box now. Like, yeah, we weren't tracking that. We weren't even looking at that before. That's great insight. So I think things like that, share those with the leader. Don't feel, oh, well, they probably won't be interested in this, or that was a bit obvious. We shouldn't have been doing that. No, share these insights. This is showing the leader that you're growing as a revenue team. But yeah, it's definitely not easy. It's a struggle when they're too close.
do you find do you find that being able to not just present data, but do
Mhm.
you find that that being able to sort of provide some insights and to give them some in-depth sort of background as to what it all means, and do you find that is a good tool to kind of help level set and get people focused on the right things?
Yeah. At this point, communication is going to be like crucial. Absolutely, not just between the teams, but between the leaders of the company as well. Really, you should be, as a sales and marketing team, you should be meeting every 2 weeks. That's a given. You should be tracking metrics. You should be discussing and problem solving. Like I've actually seen some really poor revenue meetings where they come in, they read off the dashboard and call it a day. That's not how you do it. What you're meant to do is spend a portion of that time looking at the dashboard, but then problem solve things, strategize how you're going to improve things, drive conversions. And that takes time and it takes time to perfect it. But taking it to the leadership level, you don't want to wait the whole quarter to then tell them that, oh, we've now seen these red flags, or now we're seeing that we've missed revenue. You probably want to meet them like once a month, maybe to begin with, and then maybe even twice a quarter. You need to be telling them what metrics you're measuring, why you're measuring them, because it's going to be an education for the leader as well. This is not just a shift for the teams, it's for leadership as well. The metrics you're going to be sharing are going to be so different. And that's going to take some time for them to get used to, not just seeing leads as a number on their sheet when they're looking at the dashboard. So you need to keep in close communication. You need to be sharing what pivots you're making, why you're making them, what red flags you've seen constantly. Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that I try really hard to,
Mhm.
I think there's some points where you can get lost in the data, right? You can look at so much stuff that you can completely paralyze yourself and go nowhere. And I think sometimes I see where people get caught on the wrong thing. They read a blog post 2 years ago that said they need to look at their keyword ranking every day, and I'm like, this is not helpful for anyone, right? But I think the piece here is I think there needs to be a certain amount of bravery is not the word I'm looking for, but it needs to be a safe space where we can look at this information and really try to find the things that aren't going well. Not so much just report on the great things that are happening, because there's always something good, but let's uncover the things that aren't working the way that we want them to so we can improve them, not so that we can, and I think part of what you're doing in your approach, which is like you're in the meetings, you're involved with everyone, is that gives you a place to do that. Whereas like a marketing agency probably isn't going to do that, right? They're not going to sit there and say, let me show you all the things that we think are going wrong. Because that's, that's like, hey, please fire me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't figure out what my question was there. I was just saying something out loud.
I was going to say, well, I think data is really the glue that holds those teams together. And if you aren't tracking the right metrics, it's actually going to get very frustrating for both teams. And I hear leaders do this a lot and say, well, marketing's fluffy. It's just fluff. It's not measurable. Or marketing leaders say it doesn't show we can't show ROI for our marketing spend. And that's so frustrating to hear for me, because it's not true. Marketing campaigns can all be measured, they all can be tracked, and driving revenue, it's a data game. It's a data game, like full stop. Marketing needs to be using data to make every decision, whether it's looking at paid ad campaigns that they're running and reviewing the success, optimizing it, making adjustments, or looking at lead conversions in the funnel. Like everything can be tracked, and there's a way to be creative to be sure that you are able to track ROI. That's for mailers, for direct mail, for billboards. Everything can be tracked if you think creatively. Otherwise, if you're not tracking the data, like how are you going to know where to spend more budget or where to stop spending it? But I think the bigger thing around data for me is marketing teams getting used to hearing data points from sales. It's not a muscle they've used or needed. So they need to remember that, yes, campaign data is important, but we're looking at the full funnel now. And marketing doesn't stop measuring as soon as they pass the leads to sales. We're now working the full funnel. So where are all those missed opportunities? Where are those leads not converting? And for that, you really need to be ingrained in that data of looking at the demos booked, the opportunities, the close loss, close won, the reasons behind it. So I think what I always say to teams is get your core set of data that you have to measure. Like without that, you're not going to function. Like you need that. And then what are the extras that you can also be looking at? Everyone, I think one of the problems are that everyone thinks they can do marketing. And everyone's like, oh, well, what about this data? And how much website traffic have we got? And yes, those are important, but those aren't the critical data we're looking at. And there's a piece for marketing to educate the company as well on what data is important and why we're tracking it.
So what do you think, what are some of the things that businesses, and particularly startups, should be really focused on measuring, right? If it's not the website data, which is it's a nice to have, you got to have it. But if that's not it, what should they be measuring to help, further the alignment between sales and marketing?
Yeah, in terms of measuring, it depends on the business. I know that's a simple answer, but it does depend on the business and the metrics that matter most to them, because every company is not the same. But let's say it was a SaaS company. You would want to be measuring the core metrics of demos booked, demos held, opportunities, nurture, working, closed won, closed lost. And then from that, you get lots of other data. Like, just take your demos held minus your demos booked. You'll know how many didn't turn up. That's a number there for you to think about. Well, okay, how do we nurture these? How do we get them to rebook the demo? Who can own that? Is that a sales thing, a marketing team? Who's got the skill set to nurture them to rebook a demo? For me, it's also about tracking the conversion rates. Don't just look at the numbers and think, oh, well, we got less demos this month than last month. I mean, that's obvious, but what about the conversion rates? How many of those demos booked turned up? How many of those opportunities turned into closed won versus closed lost? What are those patterns? Where can we optimize some of those conversion rates? So it's really looking at the bigger picture and kind of stepping away from the granular, like, this is what the numbers show. But really, where can we improve things? There needs to be a shared dashboard. I think that's a given between these two teams. We need to be looking at the same data. And for me, that's kind of crucial. But that doesn't mean there just needs to be one. Marketing can still have their own where they've got it broken down per campaign. But there needs to be one that we're all looking at where the data is aligned, and that we refer to that for every meeting we're at. And that's the one that you share with the leaders of the company too. But I would say to start there, look at the metrics that matter the most to the company that drive revenue, and then you can expand from that.
So let's say there's a situation where we do have you're getting appointments booked, they're showing, but there's not you're closing less than 10% that are going through the demos. What would be a suggestion? What's the first step for these two teams to come together to figure this out and not do well, you guys aren't pitching good enough. Well, you're not bringing us good enough leads, because that's going to be their first, right? That's going to be the first thing they say. So what do you recommend? What's your process for helping to solve that?
Yeah. Again, I think it's one thing that you do need to be listening to the calls as marketing, like find out what's going on, what's been discussed. And if you have the same goal, you'll be doing this anyway, of kind of saying, hey, shall we change that slide out? Or you mentioned this and actually it looks like that isn't taken too well by a prospect. So you'll be making those changes, but you need to work out where it is. So if you're finding that they get to an opportunity and then they're not becoming closed won and they're turning to closed lost, is that a different competitor they've gone to? Is that a pricing issue? Is that a feature problem? Is there something that there was just not a feature that another competitor did have? Like, what is it? And let's report that back to the leadership team. It doesn't always fall on, sales didn't do well. It might just be that there was a better feature somewhere else, or the price was less. And that's somewhere else now in the company that need to help work out, can we reduce the price? Is there a different offering we can give them? Can we charge them monthly rather than yearly? But if we're finding, let's say, the demos are just not turning up, we need to work out why that is. Are we sending them reminders? Could we send them a video of maybe someone from the sales team to say, hey, we're so excited to be meeting you next week. We can't wait. This is what we're going to discuss. Things, that they can think about before they turn up. How do you make it personable to that prospect so they remember you as a demo? Because if they've booked a demo with you, they've probably done it with a lot of others as well. So how do you stand out? If you find that they've booked, they've come to the demo and now they're just not turning into opportunity, why is that? What is the objection that they've got? What is the pain point? Is it that they've got other leaders that they need to try and sell the product to? Maybe they love it, but there's other stakeholders in the business that need to approve it too. How can we help with that? Is it that they need, I don't know, some sort of pitch deck or something from us that they can use to sell this to their CFO? Can we build that for them? Should we be providing that? So it's really finding out where in the funnel are they getting stuck and why is it, and finding and problem solving that with the sales team, like working together on that, where previously it was left to the sales team to work out. And I think marketing team have such a great skill set of being able to build great content, make it look really appealable, that their skill set fits perfectly in helping those leads convert. So yeah, I think it's really coming together, and that should be what's happening in those weekly calls that we've talked about. If you're meeting every week or meeting every 2 weeks, don't just look at the data and then jump off the call. Let's problem solve it in the call. Let's build ideas together and not leave it on one team or the other to be doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you just touched on so many different places along the funnel, right? All these different leading indicators. And I think a really important one too is that you also, said sometimes it's not a sales or marketing issue. Like sales and marketing could be doing exactly what they should, but the price is off or the feature's off or the product just isn't quite there yet. Like there are things outside of sales and marketing, which I think is really important too. But and my next question was going to be how do you stay ahead of all these different pieces? But you hit it with with these meetings that you're not just going through the motions and going, we got 10 demos, we got 5 that showed, we got 2 that bought, good job guys, next. Like you're not looking at it and go, okay, well, how do we turn 10 into 6 and how do we turn 5 into 3? and
Yeah.
where were the pieces where we can improve. And I think there's, like I said, I think there's, you have to be kind of humble with some of that and know that there's a place where you could improve.
Yeah, and that's where the magic actually happens, because I think the trap that a lot of marketing teams fall into when they start working with sales is, okay, we need to bring this many demos in. But you actually realize that if you could improve those conversion rates, you probably don't need to bring in as many demos as you think. You know, if your close rate right now is 30% and actually you can help make that 45%, if you do your backward maths, actually now you need to bring in less demos. So it works in both teams' interest to improve those conversion rates, find out where those issues are. So it means less pressure on the teams to bring in those demos earlier on in the funnel.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a really that's a big piece of, creating efficiency in what you're doing and coming back to the ROI and how do we spend less time and less resources and less effort to get more out of it. If we're going to wrap this up, and I'm going to have some takeaways from this, and I'm a marketing guy, so I will say maybe some things that marketing teams, because I don't want to say that it's always, that it's always sales or that it's always marketing, but what are the first steps that people kind of need to do to start bringing these teams together organically, and, instead of just sitting down and saying, all right, we're going to get along now.
Yeah. I think my biggest probably advice is actually to the business leaders who want to break down the silos, is to be really clear on the expectation of what you're looking for from these two teams, the new way of working that you're expecting. Give them the direction and then the autonomy to make it happen. And you need to be patient. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. You're going to get frustration from both teams before they get into the groove, before they shift into this new way of working. So they really need to kind of step away and be able to help be a coach for both teams, help support them build a solid foundation. And this is a lot of the work, we do at One Raw, is come in to help them, coach them on how to become more revenue driven, how to set up their dashboards, how to agree on that funnel structure, the terminology, to understand what metrics matter to the company, how to hold those revenue meetings and what to cover. So I think my biggest advice is to them of really try and be patient and take more of a coaching role on, because they're going to need a lot of support from their leader. But I think the other part to that is also a cultural shift that I want to make sure kind of that we cover, is that you need to make sure that as a leader of the company, but also if you've got a board, that you educate them on what you're doing. Because if you are trying to shift these teams into this new way of working, but then you're still worrying about the leads and you're asking the marketing team, well, what about the leads? Why does the leads number dropped? And you fall back into that trap, you're actually going to throw your marketing team off. They're going to become a little bit frustrated and confused as to why that's what you're asking. There's other ways for you to find out the impact marketing is having on revenue, but you just need to know what questions to ask them. So don't confuse your team by going back to asking about leads when that's not what you want them to do. Ask them about what campaigns they're doing. Ask them about the demos they've been driving through those campaigns, the ops they've created. Find out what they're working on. Where is their energy being taken up when they're working on revenue? If they're worried about improving your conversion rate from opt to closed won, and you're asking them about leads, it's just counterproductive. That's not where you want to spend your time, is asking them to report on leads. So take the role where you can support them, understand what they're working on, their priorities to drive revenue, because they will tell you. But just make sure that you do change your mindset on what you're asking your team of as well.
I think that was a way more thought out answer than my question begged for. Right? I was like, how does sales and marketing do it? Your leadership's got to do it. And that's clearly. That's the place that it's got to start. It's got to be cultural, and there's certainly it is. And I think to your point too, it's a bit of a journey, right? It's not just a destination, and it's a windy, hilly road.
Yeah. And just when you think you've got it right, there's a change in the business. The product's shifted, or your revenue target's changed now, and it's even more than higher than it was before. And you're like, oh, we just about managed it this quarter. Now it's kind of, leaders are seeing us do so well, they've raised the target even higher for next quarter. There's always challenges and bumps in the road. Yeah, so it's it's an interesting dynamic between the teams, but you can definitely achieve it.
I love it. That's awesome. So if anybody wants to get more of your insight on this, or right, or help with their startups, how can they connect with you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can visit our site, oneraw.com. Do come say hi. I mean, we'd love to hear from you, even if you're just looking for some advice. We love this topic. We love helping companies, so we are more than happy to help.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure, and it took us a couple of months to get it together, but I'm glad we finally got it together. And this is such a great subject. We could probably do 4 more of these. Do a several part series on all this, because there's a lot of moving parts. So this was awesome. Thank you.
There really is. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Take the man.